I'm Doug Goldstein. Thank you very much for joining me today. The topic today is actually a little bit of a difficult topic for a lot of people because we're talking about passing on control of your money to the next generation. And frankly, we all know that money is something that we do control, and it means a lot to us. We've worked our whole lives to put together our money, and now we want to turn it over to someone else. So let me give you an example. Remember when you were little and you went to the fair and you got a red balloon and you held on to it. It was so valuable to you. You were so proud of it. But all it really was a red balloon. So there comes a time when you have to let go. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. So let's talk for a minute about some of the signs of, let's say, the signs that it's time to begin to work with the next generation in order to pass on control. So the number one thing you have to remember is that I'm not necessarily talking about a case where someone is, God forbid, suffering from Alzheimer's or a severe disability. I'm talking about the normal things, normal aging that happens to everyone, where we find all of a sudden, wait, I don't quite remember this, or I forgot to pay the water bill, or I wrote a check but I didn't sign it and it bounced, and these little problems that can sneak up on us. And that's the problem that I want to address today. The thing you have to remember is that just because you are dealing with this problem, and everyone deals with the problem. I have to say, I can see from the audience that, well, maybe I'm young enough to be some of your children, the son of many of you, but even I have these little lapses sometimes, which is why, by the way, with my own kids who are now big enough, I talk to them about finance. They know what's going on. I haven't quite given them as much control as I will one day. But everyone has a time when he or she is going to begin to need a little bit of help, and that's okay. It does not mean that your life is over. That's not the end. In fact, I'll tell you something. It's very interesting. A lot of great people, billionaires in fact, have begun to transfer the control of their assets. They've passed the torch on to the next generation. And you know who I'm talking about? I'm talking about people like Bill Gates. I'm talking about people like Mark Zuckerberg, right? Anyone friends with Mark or Bill or even Donald Trump? Not that you have to vote for him, but he's also passing on control of the money to the next generation because he doesn't have he may not have the capacity at all, but he doesn't have the interest anymore to be dealing with the money. And that's okay. Controlling money is not a sign of being important or of being a man. It's just a sign of what's one of the things you do, and that's okay to pass on. All right, now there's a great story that I really like. In New York. Anyone here from New York? Yeah. So maybe you'll know sometimes we get very, very cold winters. And there was a time when the Indian chief tribe, the Native American chief, retired and he passed on control to his son. Now his son didn't have a lot of experience, but one day all of the Indians came to the new chief and they said, "Chief, is it going to be a cold winter? Because we need to know. We need to know whether to gather wood." So he said, He said, "Yeah, okay, it'll be a cold winter." Not that he really knew. So all the Indians went out and they gathered wood for a cold winter. And they worked very hard. And the next day they came in, they said, "Chief, yesterday we worked really hard. We need to know, is it going to be a cold winter?" And he felt a little bad because he had sent everyone out to work. So he said, "Hold on, let me consult and think about that." And he ran back to his office, he slammed the door, and he called the weatherman. And he said, "Excuse me, sir, can you tell me, is it going to be a cold winter?" And the weatherman said, "Yes, it will." And he hung up and he ran back to the Indians. He said, "All right, gentlemen, collect a lot of wood. It's going to be a cold winter." And they did. And the next day the same thing happened. And they went out and they collected more wood and they came in all tired and they said, "Chief, is it going to be a cold winter? Are you really sure?" And he went in and the chief ran back to his office and he called the weatherman and he said, "Excuse me, sir, but is it going to be a cold winter?" The weatherman said, "Oh, I'm absolutely sure it's going to be a cold winter." And he said to him, "Well, how do you know? How can you be so sure it's going to be a cold winter?" And the weatherman said, "Well, I'll tell you. Every day I drive to work, and every day I see the Indians are there collecting wood, and I know if they're collecting wood, it's for sure going to be a cold winter." So we have to realize where we're getting advice from. We need to get good advice, and we need to get good people to help you. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Who can you possibly trust more than your children? Now, I don't want anyone raising hands because I do know that sometimes it's difficult to trust your children and that everyone's got a story. You know, my day job is that I'm a financial advisor. I work with people who live in Israel who keep their accounts in the United States. They have brokerage accounts or bank accounts or retirement accounts in the States. And these are people that I work with every day, helping them with their U.S. programs. And sometimes I tell them, well, listen, let's get your children involved a little more. It doesn't always work. But you have to remember, your children are going to be just like you, for better or worse. And hopefully you've had a chance to teach them some of the most important things that they need to know about managing money. So they are the number one most logical choice. But of course, there are cases where it's not always going to work out well with your kids. What do you do? What do you do if you can't really trust your kids? If you can't count on them to deal with this? Well, that's when you start dealing with professionals. You'll deal with a financial advisor, maybe a lawyer, maybe an accountant. We'll talk to you about trusts. Anyone ever hear of, you know what a trust is, or have you heard of a trust? It's a system that you can use if you need a professional to help manage the money if you're not able to count on your kids to do it. There's a great story about a multi-millionaire who passed away, and he had about $10 million, and in the will it said, I'm going to give 1/6 of my money to my wife, 1/7 of my money to my son, and 1/8 of my money to my butler. So I told this to my kids, and I said, so what does everyone get? My son said, a lawyer. Because if you're not clear, you're going to end up with lawyers involved. Now, lawyers can be very helpful, especially if you start early on. So what's the number one thing, or what's the number one time you should get started? Well, I would like to encourage everyone in the room to get started now. Start having the discussion with your family about taking control of the money, helping you get involved. It doesn't mean they're taking over your life. It just means that they're going to help out a little bit. And there are some tools that you can use. Who knows what the number one tool is that you might use? Right, it's called a power of attorney. And in the power of attorney, your kids are going to get control, or whoever you assign control. And the one thing that's very important is that your kids have to know exactly what's going on. You have to be honest with them. You've got to tell them the whole story. If you don't let them know what's going on, if you try to limit the information or hide things, they're not really going to be able to help you well. Now, over the years, you may build up and give them more and more information until you eventually get to the power of attorney. Now, the power of attorney is a legal document where it says that you can give control of your account to your children or to your grandchildren or to your friend or your lawyer, and you can limit the amount of control, or you can give complete control up to the point where that person is allowed to withdraw money from your account. That's a normal power of attorney. Now, if you're not ready for that level, you might simply choose to give a partial power of attorney, or perhaps you might even choose to say, listen, I would like you to have some control and work with me, but you do the work and I'll sign the checks, meaning I'm not quite ready to give you all of the control. And that's also reasonable. That is a normal thing to do. That's the step before you'll actually sign a power of attorney with someone. Now, the next thing you need to think about is the confidentiality. You need to tell your family that, listen, I may be trusting you, but I'm not trusting all the cousins, and I'm not trusting my siblings. I'm not necessarily, I trust you. You're the one that I want to work on this, and you're the one who I'm entrusting. So talking about the importance of confidentiality is a fine discussion to have. That is part and parcel of dealing with a portfolio. All right, so people who are married sometimes say, well, my spouse will take care of it. My husband, my wife, they can manage the money. It's true. But I have to tell you my own experience, again, my own experience as a financial advisor, having done this for 25 years, is that sometimes husbands and wives don't see things eye to eye. You know, there's a great story about a husband. He goes to the Hanukkah party at the office, and his secretary gets very, very drunk, and he's looking and he says to her, you know something, let me drive you home. So she's all drunk, and he brings her to her car, and he drives her home, and she can't even get out of the car, and he walks her up to the door. She can't even get the key in her door. He takes the key from her, he opens the door, he brings her in, he puts her down on the couch, and then he turns around and walks out. I know, you thought something else was going to happen, right? Anyways, now fast forward, that night he goes home, and he decides maybe he won't mention this story to his wife because it just doesn't sound so good. And he and his wife go out for dinner, and as they're driving to the restaurant, they get to the parking lot, and the husband sees a high-heeled shoe on the floor of the car. So he does one of these. He goes, hey, honey, look, an owl. And his wife looks up, And in the meantime, he grabs the shoe, throws it out the window, and drives to the parking lot. And he pulls into the spot, and his wife turns to him and says, "Sweetie?" He says, "Yes." She says, "Have you seen my shoe?" It's a great example of when people don't communicate how bad things can be. So talking to your spouse about your goals and about the idea of passing on some control to the kids is important. And the two of you should sit together with the children and say, "Listen, this is our goal, this is what we want to be doing, and this is the help we would like from you at this stage," and let them be involved and listen to your kids, because they're probably old enough already that they're used to handling financial affairs. And if you need help, the last thing you need to know is that there are people you can get advice from. There are financial advisors. This is something I deal with a lot. If you have a lawyer or an accountant, that's someone else who's also able to help you out. And those are people you should talk to if you have any questions or concerns or comments. Don't forget, it's time to let go. We spoke in the beginning about holding on to that red balloon. But then if you're at the fair and you're holding on to a balloon, you can't go on to the rides. You can't eat the cotton candy. You're not free. So find a friend. Give him the red balloon to hold on to. Let it float away, and you can enjoy every day of your life. And that's what it means to share control and to pass on control to the next generation. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, I'd like to take some general questions now. And then if there's anything more personal, please feel free to get in touch with me in a minute. I'll be here. I'm staying here with my partner, Yoram Ochana, who's the one standing over there, and he can also help you out. And if you want more personalized questions, be sure to take a business card and get in touch with me. Once again, my name is Doug Goldstein. I really appreciate your inviting me here today. Have a great day.